West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
This is Democracy Watch. So, Mark, we've got some huge court decisions that we're waiting on here, so I wanted to make this episode with you and kind of let everybody know what's on the docket here. So, first off, we've got two cases at the U.S. Supreme Court with everybody's attention, and that's regarding Donald Trump, the disqualification case and also the presidential immunity case. So, when do you anticipate we'll see rulings on those cases?
Yeah, so let's take them in reverse order. The immunity case, Donald Trump's position is borderline frivolous. I mean, it's just a preposterous position that they have laid out, that somehow presidents can do whatever they want. They could, I mean, under his theory, Joe Biden could kidnap Donald Trump right now. There's nothing anyone could do about it, right? So the immunity case is going to go through the Court of Appeals, the DC Circuit. I think that's going to be done very, very quickly. The argument is on January 9th. I expect we'll get a decision from the Court of Appeals in DC very quickly, in part because the DC Circuit has already ruled in a related or a sort of related civil case involving where Donald Trump is a defendant in that was brought by a police officer who was injured on January 6th. And so the DC Circuit already there said he was not immune. And I think the DC Circuit will again say he's not immune in this criminal case. Then it will go quickly to the Supreme Court. I expect, given the stakes here, which is that it's a criminal case that is currently on hold, we will get a Supreme Court decision by the end of January. Now, that will still mean the moving of the trial in DC, but only by a few weeks. It won't fundamentally alter the trajectory. Donald Trump is going to stand trial for his crimes. Donald Trump is not above the law, and Donald Trump is going to face a jury of his peers, at least in Washington, D.C., if not in Washington, D.C. and New York before the election. So I think that's what we have on that case. Now, the second case, the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, this is the question of whether he can be on the ballot or not. This case has been petitioned by the Trump campaign, or by Donald Trump, and by the Republican Party of Colorado, because he lost this case. So everyone needs to understand, Donald Trump goes before the Supreme Court in that case as a loser, right? He's got to overturn what the state Supreme Court of Colorado has said. And as someone who read his brief, and you and I talked about this recently, it is a weak opening gambit that he led with. And I expect that the Supreme Court, given the quick turn that it has had around these things, we will probably have a decision also in that case before the end of January. So everyone needs to be watching our Democracy Watch videos that you and I do, because I know we will have something when those decisions come out, and hopefully people also follow Democracy Docket for it, because these are going to be blockbusters this month.
Right, and for those who aren't yet following Democracy Docket, it's the free news outlet Mark founded to focus on everything voting and elections. I'll put the link on this screen and also in the post description of this video. So if you're not yet signed up, it is a great resource. It's one I use every single day, so please make sure to sign up. Mark, if the Supreme Court does rule in Trump's favor in either of those cases, the immunity case or the disqualification case, What are the implications for our democracy more broadly moving forward?
I mean, if they rule in his favor on the immunity case, then honestly, we have just created a dictatorship. Because if presidents enjoy immunity from the law, like I said, I mean, Joe Biden could simply cancel the elections. He could simply say, I'm not leaving office, right? Because there's nothing you can do. There's no remedy for anything that any president does, no matter how outrageous. Now, no one thinks that that's going to be the outcome. I think that Donald Trump doesn't even think he's going to win the immunity case. I think Donald Trump thinks he's going to delay his criminal trial and avoid facing trial in Washington, D.C. before the election, because he then thinks he can pardon himself or whatever if he gets elected. So I think Donald Trump is on the immunity case, is a cornered animal who is a scared animal. He is scared of going to trial in Washington, D.C., as he should, because if he faces a jury of his peers in Washington, D.C. on the evidence that Jack Smith has, he's going to get convicted and he's going to face prison time. Now, the other case, which is the one you asked about, which is the one that in some way is getting more serious attention, is whether he can be disqualified from the ballot. Now, he's very nervous about that. I watch his body language. I watch his lawyer's body language about that case. They're worried because, again, this is game, set, match. If Donald Trump loses on that case, he is off the ballot throughout the country. Donald Trump will not be a candidate for president in 2024 or any time. And so if he wins that case, if he loses that case, I think what it means for American democracy is that the Supreme Court will have blinked at the Constitution. It will have stared at Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, passed after the Civil War to prevent precisely people like Donald Trump from running, and they will have blinked. They will have not had the courage of their convictions. So that will be a bad thing for democracy, but not nearly as important as the first case.
Okay. There's also a big case coming up in front of the Supreme Court in South Carolina. So what can we expect in that state?
So the South Carolina case is a racial gerrymandering case. Essentially, in a nutshell, the Republicans in South Carolina wanted to make Nancy Mace, who is a conservative MAGA Republican who was portraying herself as a moderate, they wanted to let her be full MAGA. And to do that, they had to move a whole bunch of black voters out of her district to make it more reliably Republican and conservative. So they did that. A court in South Carolina, of all places, by the way, a federal court, struck that down, said this was a racial gerrymander. The case is now before the Supreme Court. We are awaiting a decision to see whether the Supreme Court says that this was an impermissible racial gerrymander like the trial court did. And if so, they will be a new map in time for 2024. You can count on that. And if not, we will see what the Supreme Court says. I expect, because of the timing, I think that will also be a decision. I sound like a broken record. That's going to be a January decision.
Now, is there any other indication based on what the Supreme Court has ruled previously in analogous cases that might suggest how they would rule in South Carolina?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question, Brian, because the Supreme Court, the conservatives on the Supreme Court have sometimes showed hostility to the Voting Rights Act. But racial gerrymandering is basically saying states shouldn't have used race as the predominant factor. And as you might imagine, that actually has some appeal to some conservative justices, right? Because they are usually skeptical about the use of race in a whole host of areas. So in previous racial gerrymandering cases, it's been a long time since the U.S. Supreme Court has not ruled in favor of striking down a racial gerrymander. So odds are, just ideologically and precedentially going in, that the NAACP and the ACLU that brought this case are in really strong position. Now, the question is whether or not the conservatives on the Supreme Court will remain ideologically consistent, or whether they will want, to sort of, find a way here to save Nancy Mace's congressional seat.
Now, we've also got cases pending on mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, two crucial states as we head into 2024. What are the implications of those cases?
So I think there are two implications. The first is what it means for voters. And the second, Brian, is something you and I talk a lot about, which is the incredible hypocrisy of the Republican Party. I mean, my God. I mean, if you looked up the word chutzpah, in the dictionary, and I think chutzpah is now in like regular dictionaries, right? It's not just like the Yiddish dictionaries. There is a picture of Ronna McDaniel standing next to the RNC, because at the same time that the RNC and Republicans are saying that they want to have Republicans vote by mail, right? Bank their vote or whatever it's called. They have their lawyers in court trying to disqualify ballots. In the case of Wisconsin, it's that when you fill out your absentee ballot in Wisconsin, you need a witness. If your witness doesn't include their zip code, right? They sign their name, they put in their address, they don't put their zip code, or they put their zip code, but they don't put the state Wisconsin. Well, what state would it be, right? Plus, if they have the zip code, that somehow your ballot should be thrown out. In Pennsylvania, the case involves where the voter signs their absentee ballot envelope and forgets to put a date next to their signature. Well, who cares what date they put next to their signature? Right. The counties, when they receive the ballot, they date stamp them.
Yeah.
They date stamp them even if they're not postmarked. They date stamp the receipt. The county knows what date it came in. Who cares what date? You know what's interesting is in Pennsylvania, the counties don't even care what date. You could put a date 100 years in the past or 100 years in the future, and that the Republicans say are okay. It's just these ballots that are undated. And so these are just excuses in these two cases, one or series of cases in Wisconsin, this big important case in Pennsylvania, where Republicans are trying to find any excuse, any technicality to toss lawful ballots. So these are vitally important cases. The one in Pennsylvania is before the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, very important case there. In Wisconsin, recent victory in one of these cases that presumably Republican state legislators will now appeal, but there's a whole series of cases in Wisconsin to watch right now, and they're all on Democracy Docket, about how ballots get, counted, and how they get discarded. We talk a lot in this country about the right to vote, and for too many voters, they cast a ballot only to find out later the ballot didn't count. And in that fight, you have a clear break between what progressive and voting rights organizations think is right on one side and what MAGA Republicans think on the other.
And finally, to that exact point, we've seen instances of Republican election vigilantism. You've called this the biggest issue as we head into 2024, the biggest issue that we have to stay on top of. And these right-wing groups have been largely successful in intimidating voters and election workers and state officials. So what are the lawsuits against them seeking to do?
Yeah, I mean, can you just imagine that it is 2024 and we are facing in our country a crisis of election officials who are afraid to go to work. They're being doxxed, they're being swatted, people resigning from office, that candidates and voters find themselves facing intimidation. Voters, in Maricopa County, remember last election, trying to drop their ballots off in a ballot drop box only to find people videotaping them while wearing body armor and carrying guns. This issue of election intimidation and election vigilantism by these conservative organizations is going to be a crisis of 2024. And if we don't take it seriously and get our arms around it, it can undo our democracy. So there are a series of lawsuits that are going on right now that are trying to deal with this, both by taking away the pretextual laws that are used to challenge these voters, and other lawsuits aimed at the intimidators themselves. But Brian, this is something that is, that I think, again, much of the mainstream media has not focused on how much Donald Trump has inspired a kind of a notion of right-wing vigilantism to target voters and election officials, and we need that to stop. We need that to be told that it's not okay. And we need the courts to step in these cases.
Yeah, and obviously you and I will continue sounding the alarms about this just like we have done and will continue to do as it becomes more and more of an issue in 2024. And of course, for anybody watching, you can follow along with all of this stuff, again, in Democracy Docket. If you're not yet signed up, the link is right here on the screen. It's also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.
It is Monday, the 8th of January of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. precious. Our little Yorkie is the door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special River City Hash Mondays, because it's been a weekend, and here we are on Mondays. Now, some people might think that the college football championship is the leading story of the day, but no, you'd be incorrect, because, well, it looks like we have a worldwide fascist takeover, or at least an attempt, and we got to stop it. It's very important, not only for our survival, well, but more importantly, what is more important than our survival? I don't know, our way of life. We can't have our way of life. We don't want to survive. Well, we will find a way. But I don't want to be under the boot of a bunch of fascists. I really don't. Okay. And I bring this up because of this rally in Italy, where a bunch of black shirts did the stiff arm salute, and there was the photo of it, the video. It's kind of a tiny thumbnail size type of thing, but it looks pretty, I don't know, scary. And we already know that this fascist takeover has been in the works for quite some time. When I saw that clip of these black shirts in formation, and there was, I just got to say, it had a Nuremberg rally type flair to it. The first thing that I thought of was that these guys, these fascists in Italy, kicked Steve Bannon out of Italy for being too fascist. Bannon was too fascist for the Italian fascists who are wearing black shirts, lining up in formation like a Nuremberg rally and giving a stiff arm salute. Jeez. Then you look at Bannon and you think, that's the master race? My God. Talk about brainwashing. Well, he probably figured, look at Trump. They think he's a god. Oh, my God is right. Whew. Put some makeup on the guy, dye his hair. I don't know, some sort of wispy, weird, poofy pompadour comb over. I think that a certain segment of our society, and there seems to be quite a bit of them, fall for that BS. And they continue to. Had a little tete-a-tete on the Netroots Radio Facebook page with someone who I really don't think they listen to the show or the station. I don't think so. But, you know, our page is there, and I guess it's open to the public. You put something out there, and it's out there in the ether, and anybody can come in, and that's okay. That's okay. But typical MAGA response that that wasn't an insurrection that happened on January 6th. The gaslighting. And, of course, then it's the Pee Wee Herman defense on their side. Just, no, you're the one that's gaslighting. We saw the video. We saw it on TV. It was just a protest. And then it became a riot. And then it was fueled by the Democrats and the FBI. Well, I suppose it was fueled by the Democrats winning the election, and that was just too much for a bunch of people, right? So whenever someone says, no, that wasn't an insurrection, that was just a protest, or at worst a riot, what were they there for? What were they rioting for? Was that to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power? That's called an insurrection. I am sorry that people's civic education is so bereft in this country they cannot understand what a violent takeover of democracy is. Oh, that's just a protest. It's our right. No, it's not. It's about time people started slapping this BS down. Really? Really? Please. I'm tired of coddling these people and trying to reason with them. There was no reasoning with them. Mock them? I don't care if they mobilize. What are they going to do? They don't know diddly, except what their billionaire Nazi or Nazi billionaire masters tell them. Whew. I'm serious. It's not partisan to follow the law. It's only partisan if you have a group of mobsters who are in power saying, the law is so unfair to me, they're out to get me. Yeah, you're a crook. From the get-go, the FBI was after me. Yeah, because you've been colluding with the Russians for a long time. Why do you think there was a Russian division devoted to this guy in the FBI and other law enforcement agencies? And he shut them all down when he came into power with the help from the Russians. I know. MAGA always says, oh, you just use that as an excuse. Well, you know what? We had to live with it. This is the other thing that got pushed out at me by this. I don't know. They purport to be like some maybe rural or suburban housewife somewhere in like the great bread basket of America. I doubt it. I think it's some sort of asset sitting in Macedonia on a couch working for the FSB. But regardless, little video clips of Hillary talking about contesting the election that she lost in 2016. Which all she did is that she brought up some pertinent things or salient things that all candidates do. They said, nope, everything was fine. There was no glitches here in these election areas that you questioned. And that took about, 5 hours. The next day, in the morning, she conceded. Like all people do in America, like we did. We had to put up with it in 2016. That's what pisses me off. The first thing my MAGA bro brought up, when I brought up that he won by a quirk in the Electoral College, but he had lost by how many millions of the popular vote in 2016? And the first thing out of his mouth, my MAGA bro in his bullying way, because he's perfectly fit for MAGA, is that he threateningly says, oh, are you saying he didn't win? So, of course, that puts you on the defensive because you're going to say, no, I didn't say that. I'm saying we're going to live with it because we're Americans, like we all are. And then this guy was such a poor winner, he had to then sue various states because he was convinced that he didn't get all the votes he was due in those states. Hillary brought in caravans of illegals who voted against him. Bullshit. So you got Elise Stefanik saying she is not going to certify any election unless MAGA wins. Well, I think that's called an insurrection. Well, technically, I wish the media would get on board with this. Once an elected begins doing what Stefanik is doing, it is an insurgency, and it's been an insurgency since how many of them voted to not certify Joe's presidency on January 7th, I believe. And we've been fighting this insurgency ever since. And the gaslighting is over the top. Turning it around with the Pee Wee Herman defense. That's what I am. What are you? That's what you are. What am I? See how it works? I saw it on TV. It was only just a protest. Yeah, right. People died. A lady got shot because she's an idiot. Now her husband is going to sue the feds for a wrongful death. Look, the lady was crawling through there. She was warned. I got to say that video that MSNBC, or was it ABC that released it, that was very harrowing. And I like how the only black guy who wasn't even shown in that one is blamed for her death. He murdered her. No, he didn't. Okay. Yeah, they don't care about cops killing black kids, shooting them in the back. Oh, no, that's... The kid should have complied. Did he? I thought he was. I don't know. When I say shoot him in the back, I'm not saying like the kid was running away. I mean like the kid's on the ground. Shooting him in their house. A kid, get this, a kid called the cops because of a domestic abuse issue that was happening between his mom and her boyfriend. And then the boyfriend like ran before the cops got there. So then the cops make everybody come out of the house, and when they got the 11-year-old kid who called the cops, 911, they shot him. I guess he hulked up. Okay. And, no outcry from MAGA about that. But when you've broken into the Capitol the way that these insurgents did, these seditious whatevers, and you're held at gunpoint and told not to come through that window that you broke, and then you do, I am sorry. But that's, I don't know, that's the law, right? Jeez. How many warnings did they get? That's the other thing. He had like Republican guys like saying, this is the wrong way to do it. And I'm telling, I like to tell him, and Mark Wayne, that Mark Wayne guy was there too, the tough guy. Trying to tell these people, you're not, this isn't American. And the extremists are yelling, we're going to get you. There's a new dawn a-dawning. Yeah, damn right. And we better start really punching these Nazis because we're going to be in big trouble. Okay, enough of that. What do we have in store for you here as we begin on this Monday, River City Hash Mondays in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, yeah, the series of upcoming bombshell court decisions, well, it could signal disaster for the Republican Party, or it might not. But I like to think it will. On the rest of the menu, right-wing election integrity activists want a federal judge to rule that Georgia's use of Dominion voting machines is unconstitutional. Fox already paid out a bunch of money over this kind of stuff, but I guess they still want to play. At Florida's only public historically black university, students and faculty alike fear DeSantis's new anti-woke laws will censor race education. Well, it is. And the Alaska Airlines in-flight emergency is almost an exact repeat of what happened to a Boeing flight from Arizona to California in 2011. And I have a few things to say about what's happening with Boeing. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Anders Breivik, the Norwegian right-wing extremist who killed 77 young people in a bomb and gun rampage in 2011, will try for a second time to sue the Norwegian state for allegedly breaching his human rights. Wait until you get a description of his digs. And after a 16-year restoration, Greece has unveiled the palace where Alexander the Great became king. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. right into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we'll pick up the particulars tomorrow. This first offering is out of the Associated Press by Kate Brumback. Election integrity activists want a federal judge to order Georgia to stop using its current election system, saying it's vulnerable to attack, like from Italian spy satellites, they think, and has operational issues that could cost voters their right to cast a vote and have it accurately counted. Now, these are the people that illegally stole some voting machines and broke into them and then made them unusable. So I guess they know, right? During a trial set to start tomorrow, Tuesday, activists plan to argue that Dominion voting system's touchscreen voting machines are so flawed they are unconstitutional. Election officials insist the system is secure and reliable and say it is up to the state to decide how it conducts elections. Georgia has become a pivotal electoral background in recent years, with national attention focused on its elections because of Donald Trump. The election system used statewide by nearly all in-person voters includes touchscreen voting machines that print ballots with a human-readable summary of voters' elections and a QR code that a scanner reads to count the votes. The activists say the state should switch to hand-marked paper ballots tallied by scanners, and also needs much more robust post-election audits than are currently in place. Now, U.S. District Judge Amy Totenberg, who's overseeing the long-running case, said in an October order that she cannot order the state to use hand-marked paper ballots. But activists say prohibiting the use of touchscreens machine would effectively force the use of hand-marked ballots because that's the emergency backup provided for in the state law. Wow. Talk about lawfare. They always project, right? Lawfare. Wild conspiracy theories about Dominion voting machines proliferated in the wake of the 2020 elections, spread by allies of Donald Trump, including Trump himself, who said they were used to steal the election from him. The election equipment company has fought back aggressively with litigation, notably reaching a $787 million settlement with Fox News in April. Johnson of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. A core mission of Florida A&M University from its founding over a century ago has been to educate African Americans. It was written into the law that established the school, along with another college in Gainesville, that is reserved for white students. At Florida's only public historically black university, some students, as well as faculty, now fear political constraints might get in the way of teaching parts of their history. A law signed last spring by DeSantis blocks public colleges from using taxpayer money on diversity programs. It also forbids instructions of theories that systemic racism, sexism, oppression, and privilege are inherent in the institutions of the United States and were created to maintain social, political, and economic inequities. I guess that 3/5 thing about a human, I can't teach that. Yeah, because, it's woke. The new law, part of a broader GOP effort to rein in campus efforts on equity and inclusion, has spurred protests on campus. Some students say they are watching for new signs the new guidance will affect teaching of topics related to race and American history. DeSantis describes the law as an effort to rid university classrooms of what he calls left-leaning woke indoctrination. Well, you know, when you're a Nazi, everything seems commie, doesn't it? In fact, they called Eisenhower a commie. Eisenhower! His education policies include limits on what schools can teach about racism and which bathrooms students use, have faced criticism from civil rights leaders, but fueled his political rise by harnessing culture war passions. That's a nice way of saying the people that vote for DeSantis want a little more racism in their America. Irving of the Daily Beast brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A dangerous flaw in the original 1960s design of the Boeing 737 thought to have been eliminated will be the focus of the investigation into the emergency that caused Alaska Airlines to ground its fleet of 65 of the latest 737 model, otherwise known as the MAX. Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 from Portland, Oregon to Ontario, Canada had been in the air for 6 minutes. Was it going to Canada or California? Climbing at around 300 miles per hour when reaching a height of 16,000 feet, a side panel of the fuselage aligned with a row of seats blew out. The airline reported this as an explosive decompression caused by the sudden release of pressurized air inside the cabin into the far lower outside pressure. This was almost an exact repetition of what happened to Southwest Airlines Flight 812 from Phoenix, Arizona to Sacramento in April of 2011. In that case, the sudden explosion caused a hole in the roof of the cabin, 50 inches long and 9 inches wide. Calling in the emergency to air traffic controllers, the pilot said, "We lost the cabin." The flight diverted to the nearest airport, Yuma, where it touched down safely, but passengers recalled, as in the Alaska event, being terrified for their lives. On Saturday, the FAA extended the grounding to other airlines operating the 737-9 MAX model, a total of 171 jets, including 79 operated by United Airlines, the largest user of this model. I just have one thing to say. When the engineers were running Boeing, it was a well-respected and loved company. And ever since these hedge fund managers took over, it's been going to hell. So maybe we should let the engineers back. And in some cases, maybe the hedge fund managers should be going to jail. But that's just me. All right, let us now go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You were listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, family ties that bind and destroy. There's plenty of antics and drama on display in the Iron Claw, with most of it taking place outside of the wrestling ring. Based on a true story, the film tells the tale of the Von Erichs, the Texas-based wrestling family who ruled professional wrestling from the 1960s to the 90s. We see some newsreel-type flashbacks of patriarch Fritz's glory days, but most of the story centers on his four sons and Fritz's attempts to groom them into stars. While Fritz succeeds, it comes at a grave cost. Early on, son Kevin, played by Zac Efron in a career-making performance, talks about a family curse. However, as things progress, it becomes apparent that the real curse is Fritz himself and his take-no-prisoners approach to training his sons without regard to their physical or mental health. Along with Efron, the cast of brothers also includes Jeremy Allen White, Harris Dickinson, and Hope McCallany, all of whom give amazing performances and display remarkable chemistry. While a bit more effort could have gone into the development of the last two actors' respective characters, their performances more than make up for that flaw. There are occasional comic elements to the film, including an appearance by big-haired 80s wrestling icon Ric Flair, seen in archived video, and played live action with over-the-top relish by Aaron Dean Eisenberg. This one turns out to be mostly a tragedy, though, about a family that dwindles one by one thanks to a father obsessed with molding his sons in his image. Named for the family's signature in-ring supposed death grip, The Iron Claw is a thoughtful film that meditates on the effects of family dynamics and will have you in its grip long after the credits roll. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For older adults, optimal aging includes preventing injuries, effectively managing existing chronic conditions, and maintaining physical and cognitive health and social engagement. I'm Dr. Linda Anderson, Director of CDC's Healthy Aging Program. The promotion of cognitive health is a critical component of overall good health. Cognitive health among older adults is not just the absence of disease. It's the development and preservation of cognitive abilities such as memory, language, judgment, and remembered skills such as driving. Cognitive abilities enable individuals to maintain social connectedness, an ongoing sense of purpose, and the ability to function independently. In 2013, CDC and the Alzheimer's Association released the second in a series of roadmaps. This roadmap, the Public Health Roadmap for State and National Partnerships 2013 to 2018, was developed as part of CDC's Healthy Brain Initiative. It reflects the insights and expertise of a wide range of stakeholders at the national, state, and community levels. The roadmap shares the Healthy Brain Initiative's vision of cognitive health as a vital component of overall health and well-being, an area ripe for public health efforts. Specific actions are addressed in 4 traditional domains of public health. The first is monitor and evaluate. Tracking the health of the nation is a fundamental public health function. Actions in this area include assessments related to cognitive health that help quantify and qualify the public health impact and inform public health policies and strategies. The second domain is educate and empower the nation, which focuses on actions that raise public awareness and improve access to information and resources. The third domain, develop policy and mobilize partnerships, includes actions aimed at ensuring that cognitive health is integrated into a broad spectrum of public health work. The fourth area, assure a competent workforce, focuses on preparing public health professionals to translate current and emerging findings on cognitive health into effective public health practice. This roadmap provides a solid foundation for the public health community to anticipate and respond as new scientific discoveries related to cognitive health emerge. Public health agencies and partners are encouraged to work together on actions that best fit their mission, needs, interests, and capabilities. For more information, please visit cdc.gov/aging/healthybrain.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
If you thought that courts wouldn't try to further gut the 1965 Voting Rights Act, think again. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. In 2013, the Supreme Court, 5-4, in a case from Shelby County, Alabama, killed more than half of the historic Voting Rights Act of 1965 by striking down what's called preclearance. Preclearance meant that a state or county with a long history of racial discrimination in voting had to get an okay, a preclearance, from a federal court or the Department of Justice before it changed its voting procedures. After the court killed preclearance, areas with racially biased voting histories closed polling places, purged voter rolls, truncated early voting, instituted racially biased voter ID laws, and so on. Then, in 2023, the Supreme Court, which has blessed blatant political gerrymandering in a clear case of racially motivated gerrymandering, did not strike down the rest of the Voting Rights Act. A big sigh of relief was warranted. But the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals has just ruled that private citizens and civil rights groups no longer can bring a challenge under the Voting Rights Act. If that case were to be upheld by the Supreme Court, it would gut what remains of that crucially important law. We await the High Court's decision. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. A Georgia racial gerrymandering case was finalized December 28th, approving a new map which included another majority-minority congressional district. The map puts Georgia in compliance with the Voting Rights Act Section 2, but the Georgia legislature further gerrymandered other districts, including the district of a current black congresswoman. In early December, a federal district court ruled that Georgia must draw a second congressional district where black Georgians could elect the candidate of their choice, as outlined in the Voting Rights Act Section 2 and affirmed by the U.S. Supreme Court's Milligan decision. After the new map was submitted December 8th, democracy advocates complained that while it added the second majority-minority district, the legislature further gerrymandered other districts, including cracking the district of black Congresswoman Lucy McBath, elected by a coalition of black, Latino, and other minorities. December 28th, Judge Steve Jones ruled that while the Georgia legislature's map did meet his order, the 2019 U.S. Supreme Court Rucho case didn't allow him to rule on any partisan gerrymandering. He also noted that the case was brought to protect black voters, not a coalition of minority voters. A decision in a U.S. Supreme Court case from South Carolina later this year may determine whether legislatures can gerrymander minority areas, say it's partisan gerrymandering, and get away with it. We'll have more at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day Robert Goss, president of the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers Union, called a nationwide strike against the oil industry. The union sought to negotiate for higher wages and better medical and dental plans in the second year of a 2-year contract. 24-hour pickets were set up immediately. For a good portion of the strike, workers at many of the refineries stopped strike-breaking scabs from entering. but some refineries used management and contract workers to maintain production levels effectively. Strikers confronted scabs daily and in a few instances faced violence on the picket lines. At least one manager crossing picket lines was charged with second-degree assault after having rammed his car into a picketer at a Texaco refinery in Washington state. In Texas City, the deaths of 2 contract workers at an Amoco refinery made news when Amoco refused to allow a union representative to accompany an OSHA inspector through the site. Amoco sought a restraining order against OSHA and accused the agency of interjecting itself into a labor dispute. At Houston's Atlantic Richfield, women mobilized to form picket lines in defiance of an injunction against union pickets. In Los Angeles, area unions including the UAW, UE, ILWU, and the Teamsters formed the Los Angeles Harbor Council in solidarity with the strike. On March 1st, the council conducted a one-day shutdown of the LA ports and strike support rally that demanded victory to the OCAW strike. Oil workers would stay out 14 weeks before the strike was finally settled. They successfully won pay increases and increases in employer contributions to the medical plan and dental plan for the very first time.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. River City Hash Mondays, we always begin. Weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 40 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds will be light and variable, and then showers later on this afternoon, becoming a steady rain overnight, lows in the low 40s. Winds out of the south at 10 to 15 miles per hour, looking about a quarter inch of rainfall from this afternoon overnight. And then light rain early tomorrow, Tuesday, remaining cloudy with showers in the afternoon. Highs in the low to mid 40s, winds out of the west-southwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Bit more wind than we've had recently. And it looks like we're getting about a quarter inch of rain tomorrow as well. Looks like pollen is rated as none here in our little village of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 40 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is low at level 1. Barometric pressure is rising ever so slightly at 30.29 inches. Visibility is down to 6 miles, and relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 32 degrees with snow. Paris is 31 degrees and cloudy with a snow advisory. Rome is 52 degrees and clear with an advisory for disruptions due to heavy wind. Bagram is 36 and mostly cloudy. Kyiv is 8 degrees and cloudy. Hong Kong is 67 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 38 and mostly cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 63 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 48 and partly cloudy. Chicago, Illinois is 35 degrees and cloudy with a winter storm advisory. And New York, New York is 42 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny with a storm advisory. And that is Weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Mark Lewis of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Anders Breivik, the Norwegian right-wing extremist who killed 77 young people in a bomb and gun rampage in 2011, will try for the second time today, Monday, to sue the Norwegian state for allegedly breaching his human rights. Norway's worst peacetime killer claims his solitary confinement since being imprisoned in 2012 amounts to inhumane treatment under the European Convention of Human Rights. Solitary confinement's pretty bad. That might be a violation of human rights. But wait. Now, Norway favors rehabilitation over retribution, and Breivik is held in solitary confinement, which is a 2-story complex with a kitchen, dining room and TV room with an Xbox, several armchairs, and black and white pictures of the Eiffel Tower on the wall. Has a fitness room with weights, a treadmill, a rowing machine, while 3 parakeets fly around the complex. Even so, his lawyer, Øystein Storvik, says it is impossible for Breivik, who now goes by the name of Fjotolf Hansen, to have any meaningful relationships with anyone from the outside world, and says preventing his client from sending letters is another breach of his human rights because he was sending manifestos, and they don't want him to do that anymore. And I'm sorry, he doesn't get to see people from the outside too often. He's in prison! Let us continue. A similar claim during a case in 2016 was accepted but later overturned in a higher court. It was then rejected in the European Court of Human Rights. Breivik sought parole in 2022 but was judged to have shown no signs of rehabilitation.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Derek Katopoulos and Kostas Kantoris of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It was the largest building of classical Greece, the palace where Alexander the Great was proclaimed king before he launched a conquest that took him as far as modern-day Afghanistan. The palace in northern Greece was fully reopened on Friday last following a 16-year renovation that cost more than $22 million US, though it was in euros, and included financial support from the EU as well. It was built more than 2,300 years ago during the reign of Alexander's father, Philip II, who had transformed the Kingdom of Macedonia into a dominant military power of ancient Greece. The palace contained column-rimmed courtyards, courts, places of worship, and spacious banquet halls. His floors decorated with patterned marble and intricate mosaics. The building covered a ground area of about 160,000 square feet, a little under the area covered by the U.S. Capitol building. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.